This movie is stupid. But it's also dumb. No. It is stupid, but it's also a lot of fun. Iron Man 3, at the time when it came out in theaters, was one of my favorites of the whole thing. Keep in mind, at this point, that compared to the first Captain America, compared to the first Thor, compared to Incredible Hulk, and honestly compared to Iron Man 2, this is a pretty solid movie. Phase 2 is where we start to see an up in quality for some of the characters. People really fucking love Winter Soldier, obviously Guardians of the Galaxy. But in terms of the first 7 movies, of which this is part of, it is a pretty great movie. Looking back on it now, 5-6 years later, it's pretty dumb. It narratively has got a lot of kind of cheap, gimmicky shortcuts. The vice president's the bad guy because he's got a daughter with one leg or whatever. Tony's got all these fuck-off suits, and the climax of the movie is all the suits coming to his rescue, but, couldn't he have done that a long time ago? The moment he says, hey, Mandarin, come fight me, maybe engage the protocol where all the suits defend you, instead of doing nothing. It's got some problems. Once again, the villain's lame. At least it's not like the first 2 Iron Man. It's not Iron Man versus a dude who's just like him, another guy in a suit. Unfortunately, what we get is discount Val Kilmer. I mean, it's Guy Pearce. Guy Pearce is a good actor. If you haven't seen LA Confidential, he's brilliant in it. The Proposition is a fantastic Australian movie. He's great in that. He's a good actor. This feels like he's trying to be Val Kilmer. He kind of looks like Val Kilmer, his hair, I don't know. And maybe it's just because I love Kiss Kiss Bang Bang so much, which is a good enough segue into the director. This is the first new director for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Favreau created the thing with Iron Man and Iron Man 2, and I think there was talks of him doing the Avengers, but Iron Man 2 was a bummer. There was too much studio interference, there were too many notes. It wasn't exactly a fun shoot for him. So I think he kind of stepped away. He was like, I don't really want to direct these anymore. It's getting a little bit too big for me. I just want to tell stories and I'm not really allowed to anymore. So he stepped back. Something we'll see again with Joss Whedon. So for Iron Man 3, they brought in Shane Black, which for me is fucking great. Shane Black's been writing movies forever. Most famously, he wrote the first Lethal Weapon. He wrote The Last Boy Scout. His kind of thing was buddy cop movies with a hard R edge and really funny dialogue. He wrote Monster Squad, Wolfman's Got Nards. He's a great, great writer with some iconic moments, iconic characters. And he directed 1 movie, or maybe 2, before this one. And it was Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which financially didn't work. But everyone who's seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang knows it's fucking great. It's a kind of a cult movie, if such a thing can happen in the age of the internet. And Kiss Kiss Bang Bang was also kind of Robert Downey Jr.'s return to form. He is fantastic in that movie, and his cohort in that movie is Val Kilmer. The buddy, the relationship between those two is wonderful. So I don't know, when you watch this movie, it feels a lot to me like what's his fucking name? Killian should have been played by Val Kilmer, and that was the idea. I don't know, I could be wrong, it just kind of feels that way. But Shane Black's a cool choice. He wrote the script, co-wrote it, and directed it, and it's got all the Shane Black hallmarks. It's set at Christmas time. It has kind of a buddy cop situation to it with Rhodey and Tony. It's got a funny kid. It's it's action packed, but also kind of really jokey, so on and so forth. Shane Black's a great choice. I would very much, if ever there's an Iron Man 4, Shane Black would be the guy to do it. I think he really understands Tony Stark. The movie is silly as fuck, but Tony's great in it. All his little moments are lovely in it. The plot of this movie, despite how silly this thing is, this is a movie with Tony Stark hanging out with a little kid and hanging out in a garage building toys. This is a movie where one of Tony's suits gets hit by a truck and breaks into a million pieces. This is a movie with a giant 12-foot tall stuffed bunny rabbit. It's a silly movie. But it's also a movie where the plot is the bad guy takes veterans who have missed limbs and has injected them with a serum that can help them regrow their limbs, but also he can use them to explode and be human bombs that leave no evidence. That's pretty fucking crimson. That's a pretty fucked up plot. It's also a movie where Tony's dealing with post-traumatic stress, and I'm just going to talk about the things I love for a second here. I love the action sequences. I love seeing all my characters back again. I love seeing Happy. I love seeing Rhodes. The best part about this, though, is it continues Tony's arc, including the Avengers. He gets to grow. He's not just hey, I saved the world. He's fucked up. He's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder in this movie. He's got massive anxiety attacks, whenever he thinks about New York or gods or aliens or portals, it fucks with his head. And what he's been doing since the Avengers is hanging out in his room making robot suits. Those ones up there. In Avengers, we hear him say Mark 7, which is the suit where he puts the bracelets on and it shoots out the window, and that's the climax of the movie. He's on Mark 42 at the beginning of this movie. And there's no, like, you know, hey, Mark 42. Unless you're really paying attention to the other movies, like I was like, holy fuck, Mark 42? So I kind of called the climax of this movie early on. I was like, there's going to be a fuck-off bunch of Iron Man suits. But yeah, this movie does deal with Tony's mental health a lot more than it does a coherent plot or a good villain. His relationship with Pepper is great. Their dynamic is lovely. The first act of this movie works really well. It's when the stupidest thing ever happens, where Tony gets on national TV and says, "Here's my address, come blow me up." And then that's what happens. That's when things start to go sideways. Other things I love. I like that he's out of the suit most of the movie. I don't know anyone who dislikes that. Even people who dislike this movie, I think, enjoy the fact that Tony's not really in the suit. Thematically, the whole point of the 4 Iron Man movies we've seen, Iron Man 1, 2, 3, and Avengers, is that Tony is not just the suit, you know? He's more than that. And in this movie, he has this whole thing about, like, I can't wear my suit, then what the fuck am I doing? It protects me, it protects people I love. That's why I make the suits. And he has to spend the whole movie out of it. And instead of getting, you know, more Iron Man sequences, we get kind of James Bond if Tony Stark was James Bond. He's out of the suit, he's inventing low-tech gear, using shit he bought at Home Depot. He has to use hand-to-hand combat. It's really interesting to see him doing those things. You know, him and Rhodes have to engage in the climax as 2 guys with guns, not as 2 guys in suits. And it's really cool to see somebody that powerful have everything taken away. So much so that the last thing I'll talk about that I love is the end of this movie is Tony blows up all of his suits. He destroys all of them and he goes back to scratch. And it ends with him going back to his house, which we saw get blown up earlier. And he takes the arc reactor out of his chest and throws it into the ocean because, well, he didn't. It's not at the end of the movie. He's him ripping it out of his chest. He got heart surgery. He decided that he can. And I remember having that thought somewhere during Iron Man 2 when he was dying of palladium poisoning. Like, dude, you're a billionaire and you're a genius. You can't just, like, figure out a way now that you're back in America and not in a cave to have the shrapnel removed from your chest. They made good on that thought I had. Like, he can, and he does. So he no longer has the glowing circle in his chest anymore. He gets to be a human again. So he goes back to his house and he throws the arc reactor to the ocean. And he's there to rescue the fucking stupid robots that we've seen in the first 2 Iron Man movies. It's great. It's a lovely little thing. This movie worked, unlike Iron Man 2, which is kind of a shitty Iron Man sequel, but is an okay Avengers prequel. This is a great Iron Man sequel. It's a kind of a dog shit Avengers sequel. The president gets kidnapped in this movie. Captain America is nowhere to be found. The stakes are pretty high in this. Tony's house is blown up, and we don't get any sense that anybody's worried. You know, there's no scenes with Bruce Banner at Stark Tower going like, "What the fuck? Tony got blown up. Like, I'm the Hulk. I should probably go help." Nope. There are references to Thor. There's references to the portal, references to New York. But this is the first one, and we'll see this a lot in Phase 2. Where you're like, where the fuck are the other Avengers? Like, I understand you can't afford to pay all those actors, but if you're going to tell stories with these characters, try to tell stories where you don't feel like Iron Man should be there, or Captain America should be there, or whatever. So while we're on the subject of negatives, what else do I not like about this fucking thing? I don't like the villain. Marvel's only had 3 good villains by my reckoning. And I don't mean like up till now, I mean like across everything. From Iron Man all the way through Infinity War. There's only been 3 good villains. Loki, Thanos, and Hela from Thor Ragnarok. That's basically it. I don't know if I'm missing anything, but those 3 villains. I mean, I like James Spader. We'll get to Age of Ultron, but so yeah, this villain is kind of lame. He's really kind of one-dimensional. Yeah. The movie opens up in 1999, and we get a nice little moment about. You know, we see Jensen again, like he met in Iron Man 1, the guy who kind of saves him, puts the thing in his chest. He says, we met once at a symposium in Bern, Switzerland. We get to see that moment, which is nice, but like the plot of the movie is Tony was a dick to a nerd once, and that nerd was like, I want to fuck your girlfriend, and grew up to be evil. It's kind of lame. Also, in terms of continuing the story, in this movie, there's a whole thing where like they're going to reprogram the human genome to help people heal, and they kind of have it down. Like it works some of the time, and a byproduct of it is you get to be really super strong and you can melt shit with your hands. Sometimes people blow up because they can't control the heating ability. But like you would think that if the fucking studies have gone far enough that we're at this point that they would have. I don't know. We never hear about soldiers or anybody who can heal themselves again after this movie. It works really well as a one-off sequel to an Iron Man series, and it ends lovely. Like it ends. The last line of the movie is, despite the suits, despite the house, blow up my house, take one of my suits, take away everything. Doesn't really matter. I am Iron Man. That's really appealing. At the time, it was fucking amazing. Now you want more because the stakes have gotten so fucking high and there's so many characters. You can't help but wonder what else everybody else is doing. Something they hadn't quite figured out till Phase 3. For my money, Phase 3 is the best of the phases, and we'll get there eventually. So yeah, that's kind of my take on Iron Man 3. It's a lot of fun. I should talk about the other villain. Fuck, the Mandarin. I should mention the red elephant in the room. Or pink elephant, or whatever. Just the elephant in the room. So Iron Man 1 introduces these bad guys who kidnap him in a cave, and everyone's kind of fucking around with rings in that movie. And in Iron Man 2, Mickey Rourke is given like a passport and money and information, and that's how he's able to go to Monaco and fuck up Tony Stark's day. And again, everyone we see has rings on. That's a reference to the comic books, the 10 Rings. And the Mandarin is kind of like Tony Stark's Joker. He's the big fuck-off villain, his nemesis, I suppose, in the comics. From what I understand. I don't read Iron Man comics, but I understand. And they set up the idea that there are 10 rings. If you pay attention during Iron Man and Iron Man 2, you see 10 characters with 10 rings. And those are Mandarin servants. This movie, the trailer is all set up. It's going to be the Mandarin, and it's going to be Ben Kingsley. He's got an Oscar. He played fucking Gandhi. This is going to be great. They didn't go that way. Turns out the Mandarin is actually an actor who's like a Cockney dude who's a drunk and a drug addict. And it's really funny. It's a nice like left turn in the movie. I enjoy it a lot. There are some hardcore Iron Man fans who hated it. Having done more research since, and even at the time, I get why they did it, because the Mandarin is a real big racial stereotype with like a Fu Manchu mustache. It would not work, let's put it that way. Or if it was going to work, you'd have to be real careful not to make it a cliche and a stereotype and really fucking racist. So I like the fact that they kind of went left with it. This is the first movie where you can kind of see that they're going to get to Guardians level nonsense. Kevin Feige was really smart to allow this decision. Phase 2, I mean, I said in the previous video, the Avengers, Phase 2 is kind of weird because we don't really get to, like, the story arc of the whole thing doesn't really track. You could kind of just go from Avengers to Avengers 2 and it wouldn't really matter what you missed in between. I'm wrong about that. I had been thinking about it. This movie shows that Marvel's willing to take chances. Part of the fun of the first phase was Tony's got suits, and we get to see phase, Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, up through Mark 7. And in this movie, they introduced the idea of there's 42 different Iron Man suits, some of which are clearly designed to fight the Hulk if he goes bad. It's a cool idea, and at the end he blows them all up, which is something that I wouldn't have thought they would do. We've got an arsenal of suits, let's save them. But nope, we blow them all up. When we get to Winter Soldier, we'll talk about something else that gets blown up, and I think that's pretty growlsy. So it does have its merits, this movie. If you enjoy just hanging out with Robert Downey Jr. and Gwyneth Paltrow and fucking Jon Favreau and War Machine, what's his name? Don Cheadle. It's worth your time. It's a quick movie. It's 2 hours, 10 minutes, but it doesn't really feel overlong. There's plenty of things to nitpick and bitch about, but in a fun way. It's a fun movie. It's a popcorn flick in the best way. And I always say that, like, I'll take bad storytelling if it's awesome enough. And this, for me, it is. This movie is pretty fucking awesome on a very basic, like, look at all those Iron Man suits blow shit up. One of the things I dislike about The Last Jedi so much is it's really stupid. The plot makes no sense. There's no such thing as, like, momentum in space in that movie and yada, yada, yada. But also, like, it's also lame. Like, we don't get to see Luke Skywalker do cool shit like pull things out of the sky. So you gotta have one or the other. Both would be great. If it's really smart and it's awesome, thumbs up. But if you're gonna be stupid, you better be awesome. And if you're gonna be smart, then you better have it pay off. Like, I don't know. So anyway, I like this movie a lot. I'm not going to bother doing a tag for this one. This was the first movie post-Avengers, came out 1 year later. The tag on this is just Tony, the movie opens with narration, another Shane Black hallmark. the tag is Tony Stark's been narrating this whole story to Bruce Banner. So we get to see Mark Ruffalo again. Which is cool, because after the Avengers, you were like, holy fuck, the Hulk should be in everything. I love the Hulk. And he doesn't really get to show up in movies until, Avengers again. So that was the little tag. It doesn't set anything up for the next movie. This movie does kind of feel like a one-off, a standalone, which is interesting. And I mean, it's a good idea. After the Avengers, you needed a breath of fresh air. Like, we just watched, Earth's mightiest heroes come together to fight this big fuck-off villain. Let's just have a silly little adventure in Tennessee and also kind of in Florida. It's fun. I like this movie a lot. So check it out if you haven't seen it already. If you're going through them all like I am, it's worth watching. It's not worth skipping. Like, say something like Thor: The Dark World is worth skipping. Speaking of which, I will see you on Wednesday with Thor: The Dark World. The one I'm looking forward to the least, aside from the first Thor. Boy, those Thor movies suck, don't they? Anyway, I'll see you next time on Marvel Rewind with George Efta. Please like, share, and subscribe. And leave a comment. Let me know if you're digging what I'm doing or you don't give a fuck. Bye.